Imagine Galveston Island, a very long time ago, long before we made it our home. Others came before us. Their stories are a part of who we are today. Believe it or not, the first people who set foot on these shores used dugout canoes for transportation. These native people were called Karankawas, and they came to the island looking for food and fresh water. Thankfully, there was plenty of it. They hunted deer and small game, fished for shellfish and turtles, and gathered fruits and berries. They were taller than most Texas Indians, strong swimmers and runners, and just like most of us today, their favorite companions were dogs. In fact, the name Karankawa means dog lover. After these first natives, Europeans came from across the ocean. In the early 1500s, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca shipwrecked here. And to make matters worse, he was made a slave for a time. To survive, de Vaca worked as a trader and healer among the Karankawa and other tribes. He even performed the first known surgery in North America. De Vaca and some of his fellow castaways made their way on foot to northern Mexico, where Spaniards discovered them. Later, de Vaca boarded a ship to sail back home to Spain. But when did the island get the name Galveston? Well, in 1785, Spain sent a cartographer named José de Villa to create a map of the Texas coast. He named Galveston Bay in honor of Bernardo de Galvez, a friend and patron. Eventually, the island community would become known as Galvestown, or Galveston. 30 years later, more Europeans came to the island. French privateer Louis-Michel Aury used the island as a base to fight Spanish royal forces during Mexico's War for Independence. Pirates and outlaws took advantage of the island's locations too. The infamous Jean Lafitte and his brother Pierre built a settlement called Campeche, where they kept their pirate loot and traded stolen goods with other pirates and privateers. The pirate crime wave came to an end in 1821, when the United States Navy forced the Lafittes and other pirates out of the region. Afterwards, the Republic of Mexico officially established Galveston Island as a port of entry in 1825, opening a customs house there in 1830. A few years later, during the Texas Revolution in 1836, Galveston was the official port for the Texas Navy and the escape route for the new Texas government when Santa Anna's army attacked. After the war, the Republic of Texas claimed Galveston Island, and the population began to grow. In 1838, Michel B. Menard and other investors founded a town along the harbor and gave it the name Galveston. As a port city, Galveston soon became a major center of trade and commerce and attracted immigrants from all over Europe. After the Civil War and emancipation, many African Americans made the port city their new home. Before long, Galveston had become a culturally diverse, international city. By the 1880s, Galveston was the second busiest immigration entry point in the United States after New York City. In fact, it was often called the Ellis Island of the West. It was also the most important shipping port of Texas and the second largest on the Gulf Coast after New Orleans. Local community leaders like Rabbi Henry Cohen of Temple B'nai Israel were strong supporters of immigration to the city. Cohen often met Jewish immigrants at the docks where he would welcome them to their new home in America, alongside local public officials such as the sheriff. If needed, the rabbi would even use his own money to buy the new arrivals' clothes and other supplies, and he would also help them find jobs. Many of these immigrants returned the favor and eventually became the island's civic leaders and business people. Hard-working families such as the Kempners, Moody's, Rosenbergs, Seeleys, and many other local merchants, traders, bankers, and landowners helped transform the city by backing efforts to expand the Galveston docks, build warehouses, rail lines, a commercial cotton exchange, and create a thriving business district known as the Strand. By 1870, Galveston was the largest city in Texas. In 1881, Galveston opened the first state medical school, and in 1894, Galveston opened the first grand opera house in the state to host the best theatrical productions in turn-of-the-century Texas. The city also nurtured a variety of local artists and performers who would become world-renowned. One was German-born painter Julius Stockflath, who specialized in landscape paintings and portraits of local citizens. The town also produced the internationally famous pianist Lucy Hickenlooper. She was better known by her stage name, Olga Samaroff. Some of the country's most noted architects helped transform the coastal city. Nicholas Clayton, an Irish immigrant, and Alfred Mueller from Germany were both renowned architects of that time, who made their respective marks on the cityscape with many beautiful buildings. Mr. Clayton designed the famous Bishop's Palace, the original Galveston City Hall, and Central High School at 26th Street and Avenue M, which was the first black high school and housed the first black public library in Texas. Local wealthy patrons paid for an orphanage housed in the building you're standing in, so that children who did not have parents or their own homes could have shelter, food, and an education. Galveston of this time was known for its innovations too. The Electric Pavilion was the first building in the state to use electric lighting, and the first telephone in Texas was located on the island. Galveston also installed the first gas street lights and built the first urban rail public transportation system in Texas, and was home to the first public hospital and public library. Galveston even hosted the first professional baseball game held in Texas. Many found Galveston to be one of the most racially progressive cities in the South. Galveston resident Norris Wright Cuney, whose mother was a slave and father was a white plantation owner, was the most powerful black political leader in the country at that time. But Galveston's most famous resident was Arthur John Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight boxing champion of the world. Johnson was known as the Galveston Giant because of his physical strength and size. Although he had been born to former slaves, Johnson grew up alongside his white contemporaries. Blacks and whites in Galveston spent time in each other's homes, eating alongside each other's families, and even staying overnight. Johnson once said that, "No one ever taught me that white men were superior." By the end of the 1800s, Galveston was by far the most socially progressive, culturally diverse, and most economically developed city in Texas, with nearly 38,000 residents and some of the wealthiest people in the United States. But just when the future looked bright, a disaster struck the city. On September 8, 1900, a powerful hurricane rose out of the Gulf of Mexico and almost completely destroyed the city. Over 8,000 people lost their lives. Across the city, homes, buildings, roads, ships, and industries were destroyed by the wind and sea. It is known to this day as the worst natural disaster in the history of the United States. But Galveston rose to the challenge. The American National Red Cross led the recovery efforts under the leadership of President Clara Barton and local Red Cross official Eliza Kempner. Everyone joined together to rebuild the city. And over the next 10 years, the seawall that you walk along today was constructed to help hold back flooding from the sea. They even raised the city ground level as much as 17 feet to keep buildings safe from future rising tides. It was a superhuman effort, but through hard work and determination, the citizens of Galveston brought their city back to life. Galveston soon became a national tourist destination, attracting thousands to its sandy beaches and historic Strand District each summer season. During the winter, snowbirds come to the city to escape the intense cold and snow of the northern states. Galveston, however, is more than a tourist destination. It is a community that is proud of its rich history and works hard to take care of the treasures of the past and the stories of those who came before us. Just like the building we stand in, our past is part of who we are today.